and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel, where we are going to be continuing with what looks like just an absolute goldmine of Maupin thought. And, I don't know if everybody saw this, but Fox News had one of those wonderful Fox News moments in Palestine where, see, they had been embedded with the Israeli military to do propaganda for them, and they didn't do very well at the propaganda because they were filming what was supposed to be a Palestinian ambush. And the thing is that they didn't turn the camera off at the right time, and so they caught the actor playing the Palestinian who was ambushing them getting out of wardrobe afterwards. You know, I mean, that would be a career-ending thing if this weren't the US and it weren't Fox News. I don't even think that if it were CNN it would be career-ending, to be honest. I've really... I don't see any sign that, like, being completely discredited will harm your career at all in the US media. Look at Thomas Friedman, he does okay. Meanwhile, in what is totally not just comic book villain level evil, the state security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, has banned all expressions of joy on the part of Palestinians at the return of the Palestinian, a small number of the Palestinian hostages that Israel took. Overwhelmingly women and a whole lot of children, including a whole lot of under fives, who, and an even larger number of people who were kids when they were taken hostage. So, yeah, and this, it's worth noting, I mean, that is a fucking historic achievement of the Palestinian resistance. That's, nobody else really gets credit for pushing Israel to the point of actually having to release some of these hostages. Oh, hello, Adria. Caleb was having a Twitter beef with some libertarians this afternoon. It was hilarious. He's still mad about being thrown out of a helicopter. Yeah, I guess you would be, but I mean, that's, see, I'm not keen on it either, which is why I don't hang out with those motherfuckers. I don't share a platform with them, because obviously, if they're not on the same side, but he's a fascist who likes to cosplay as sort of a really bad fake communist. So he hangs out with them, and then he gets angry when they do the shit that they're known for. It's wild. It's just sort of a fascinating cinematic universe he exists in. And yesterday we started to see some of his amazing, absolutely incredible takes on dentistry and why people are hesitant to avail themselves of dentistry. And we're going to continue with that, obviously. I'm going to start it from the beginning for the benefit of anyone who missed out on this just fascinating look into the mind of a man with a cult of personality, but no personality. Yeah. I mean, he uses that picture to represent himself, and it really demonstrates the sort of judgment that makes him obvious choice for an ideological leader. So, As I said, we're going to start from the beginning because nobody should miss this. Donate for some genocide. That's, talk about things that I'm not likely to do. Fucking liberals are, like, trying to give him credit for the fact that after weeks and weeks of mass murder and international pressure, he decided to try to take the pressure off by being willing to agree to a 4-day pause in genocide, which Israel has already broken. They already, are doing the thing that they're not supposed to be doing during this pause, shooting at people. He's an amazing piece of shit, and his stands are even worse. Fuck off. Like, yuck.
If you want the performance of stainless steel, the versatility of cast iron...
Why the hell am I getting this? Like, I just had an ad. It was a bad one. It was fucking...
Dentist's office.
Yeah, no, let's come on.
Nobody likes to go to the dentist's office.
How's the audio?
Nobody does. Right? There are some people, though, that want to be dentists. I think I watched, what was that one of those old claymation, Christmas specials where they got the kid who's playing with the doll's teeth. I want to be a dentist. There are people like that. There are people that love dentistry, that love teeth from the time that they're kids. They love teeth.
He manages to make everything seem deeply fucked up. Somehow, you learn a lot about how he relates to shit from the way he assumes others do. Tell me if this is better.
They're playing with the doll's teeth when they're a kid.
What fucking teeth dolls are you? Like, what kind of anatomically correct oral anatomy dolls was he playing with as a kid?
They study dentistry. They go to dentistry school. They become dentists. So. There are people like that.
Yeah, that's such a fucking insight into society right there. There are dentists. Ideological leadership material right there.
And most of us think those people are freaks and they're weirdos. And most of us will do anything we can to avoid going to the dentist. We just want to live our lives. We don't like the drill. We don't like the...
You think that they're freaks? Like, he thinks that people think that dentists have a tooth fetish.
We don't like it. However, that day comes when you've got that cavity. That cavity that hurts so bad. Where you can't stand it anymore.
Look at the fucking snide look in his face. Like, yeah, I'm nailing this one. This is A material right here. Especially about the bit where people apparently think dentists are freaks.
Hey, god damn it, I gotta find me a dentist. I gotta find me some freak who thinks about nothing but teeth all day long.
What the fuck does he... What dentist does he know? What is this? Like... Does he... really think that that's... Does he think that that's what dentists are? Or does he think that other people think that and he doesn't, which is somehow weirder? If he actually thinks that this is what other people think and it isn't what he thinks, that manages to actually be weirder. Well, that's the thing. The cavities, the most advanced cavities are the ones with true class consciousness.
Who graduated from dentistry school. I gotta find me some tooth expert to pull that cavity out, to give me the best dental care I want. That's the moment that is coming.
What the fuck do you know about my mouth?
That is the moment that America is facing. Sure, most of the time people would prefer not to think about revolution. Most of the time people would prefer to not to think about communism and Marxist economics.
Like, he thinks that people in the back of their mind are like, yeah, maybe communism's a thing we might need, but it just seems like a lot of hassle and there's probably a drill involved. Like, is this actually how he thinks that, like, the majority of people relate to communism? Even, like, his fake-ass bullshit fascist version of communism?
But the cavity is getting worse. And the pain is becoming more intense.
Every moment of watching Caleb Maupin is the pain growing more intense.
And your average store-bought toothbrush ain't gonna cut it anymore.
Does he think that dentists don't buy their stuff at stores?
We are entering a period where you're gonna need an expert. You're gonna need a fanatic. You're gonna need a group.
You're gonna need a guy who's read 2 paragraphs of Karl Marx and can quote them back to you on demand.
Of people who give the whole of their lives. You're gonna need a group of people who believe in this and live and breathe it. You're gonna need a group of people who are ready to go all in. Ready to endure persecution, ready to make sacrifices, ready to risk.
He thinks that he thinks that it's like a service provider model, like revolutionaries are sort of like the Ghostbusters or something.
Their lives. You're gonna need that. And if you don't think we're gonna need that, take a look at Donetsk and Lugansk right now. Take a look at what Syria has been through. Take a look at what's going on the African continent. Take a look at what's happened in Venezuela. We're going to need that.
There's a middle bit that he's leaving out.
America is going to...
Maybe he, much like a dentist I once dealt with about a decade ago, maybe the drill just hit a whole bunch of stuff it wasn't supposed to. And so the middle bit where where all of this is brought together in a way that makes at least like Maupin grade sense, got drilled out and is like being spat into the spit basin now.
Have a cavity it can't stand pretty soon, and it's gonna need a group of fanatics.
Fun fact. One term that the Nazis really, really loved. Victor Klemperer mentions it in his LTI, Lingua Tertiae Imperii, language of the Third Reich, that he was like a diary. He was a philologist, and he kept diaries on everything that was just going on, and one of them was just looking at what Nazis were doing to language. And one of the things he points out is that, like, the idea of fanatic as a positive thing, of fanaticism, of fanatical being used as a positive thing that should be encouraged, was very much something that was a Nazi invention.
Fanatical, dedicated people, a group of freaks, and obsessed...
Well, I mean...
dedicated people who are willing...
Okay, so he's just leaning into that, because I seem to remember when Hinks and Jackal was still with CPI Mark 1. Yeah, he once remarked on from the platform, from the stage at Austin, at all the normal people, and now Hinks and Jackal has left, and he's just saying that the people in his group are a bunch of freaks. That's
willing to give the whole of their lives to rescue it. Maybe that's you, and maybe it's not. But that's what we're going to need. And that is what I am trying to build.
God, like, I mean, the last thing, his fucking ragtag bunch of Nazbols could to save the day. He's like, he thinks that Bruce Willis is going to play him in the movie.
I am looking for a few good men and a few good women, a few good people.
That was him realizing that maybe Peter Coffin Peter Coffin still hasn't left him. Amazingly, actually, because I mean Peter Coffin is completely full of shit. They're a total grifter. But they, for some reason, and they're also considerably better at like literally everything to do with the technical aspects of the grift than Caleb Maupin is. But for some reason, they've decided to hitch their wagon to this star. I don't get that, but
We're in this for real, and are willing
that's why
to make sacrifices. And
yes, you're gonna have to live in a hotel in Jersey City and pay rent to me and go out and sell shitty merch, in order to make me money.
Understand truth and justice. That's what I'm looking for. And if that's you, I need you more than ever. And if that's not you, sorry.
I need you more than ever.
Sorry. I don't exactly get the joke here, Killian.
That's not surprising because jokes are not a thing he's good at.
Well, I mean, I laughed very hard when I saw this, but did Earl Browder say you're going to be a dentist? You know,
Oh, fucking hell.
Like, I'm overthinking this, Killian. I'm probably just overthinking this, right? There is that classic, like, claymation movie, I forget which one, where, like, the subplot is that one of the elves of Santa Claus wants to be a dentist, right?
Okay, I was thinking this was like an Earl Browder claymation, and that would be interesting.
And people make fun of it, right? It's become like a running joke. At least when I was a kid, it was a running joke because everyone had seen this corny claymation Christmas movie on television from the 70s.
It's still less cringe than this.
And there's this elf who goes, "I want to be a dentist," and everyone laughed about it. So I was bringing that up. I was referencing.
He just did with his fucking cultural references. I mean, he just has his fucking finger on the pulse of a generation. I mean, wait, he's gonna bust out some, like, just cool fucking, Donna Reed references.
That in my analogy. But I don't know what it has to do with Earl Browder. What does it have to do with Earl Browder? Why is Earl Browder, how does he fit into this? You know, I mean, if there's ever a
more of a legit communist than Caleb Maupin, at least. Which isn't saying much. I mean, still, Stalinist associated with state capitalism. I mean, but still closer than Caleb Maupin, because Caleb Maupin is pretty fucking far. Like, he isn't even, like, a legit pretend communist.
Who wanted to be a dentist, it would have been Earl.
And also, I mean, the thing is, the CPUSA actually did some useful stuff, unlike the CPI, which has never done anything useful to anyone other than Caleb Maupin. I mean, the CPUSA, for all the criticisms one can direct at it, and there are many, particularly in the early 20th century, did a whole bunch of really useful shit.
Earl Browder. Did he use that as an insult? No, that wasn't Earl Browder. Oh, now I get it. Okay. Wasn't Earl Browder. Now I get the reference.
He's not writing down his super chats anymore.
Gillian, thank you for clearing that up. No, that was Irving Howe. That was Irving Howe, the Trotskyite.
Irving Howe of DSA, who is also a big fucking Zionist as well.
Irving Howe, right, who was the Trotskyite who ended up working for the CIA. Irving Howe
may or may not be true.
All right, he was a Trotskyite, and during World War II, he ended up working with Irving Kristol, and he worked for the Congress for Cultural Freedom. And he was one of the famous, like, State Department socialists.
I mean, in the case of Irving Howe, that really is not a bad descriptor at all. Let me just say. He uses this in all sorts of bullshit ways, but Irving Howe, yeah, fuck him. Big on Israel, big on, whatever the hell the U.S. was doing. I mean, just fucking useless.
And the story goes that he went to a college campus, and this is in like it's in his autobiography, and it's in like his Wikipedia page, I think, is that he went to a college campus in the 60s, and a Maoist was yelling at him. Some young Maoist was yelling at him, about, oh, you're a pro-imperialist, you're a fraud. And he said to him, you know what you're going to be, kid? A dentist.
Yeah, I mean, the idea being, of course, that he's going to end up in, a position of, like, bourgeois respectability or something like that. Unlike Irving Howe, who is just so fucking proletarian. So fucking revolutionary there, Irving Howe.
And I read that insult, and I didn't get it.
That surprises me because he thinks dentists are a bunch of freaks with a tooth fetish. He thinks that when somebody is like removing a cavity or doing a root canal on them, that they're like fucking coming.
I still kind of don't get it. Like, dentists, that's a respectable job, right? They make a lot of money.
That's the fucking point. That's like literally the fucking point. This is like one of the many things that he just doesn't get. I mean, that was one of the things that was really kind of sticking out to me last night when we were looking at those DMs between him and Keffels. Where he basically, his whole thing is that, Venezuela's shitty on LGBT rights, so, like, that it's somehow wrong for, Keffels to apparently at some point have taken a fairly bog-standard anti-imperialist stance of, critical solidarity. He literally does not comprehend the idea that you can say, there's a lot of shitty things that this government is doing, but the U.S. should not. That doesn't mean that the U.S. should be allowed to just, interfere and manipulate and invade them and fuck around with them at will. It's just a basic into anti-imperialism that you don't have to like every single thing that a government that does to oppose imperialist meddling and, outright aggression against them. And he doesn't comprehend that. He thinks that's a contradiction. He literally thinks, that the only way that you can oppose, like, say, the invasion of Iraq in 2003 is if you like Saddam Hussein. Like, I mean, he doesn't even comprehend anti-imperialism. Yeah, I mean, I have no idea why he's going off on a long beef about dentists. Nobody knows why he does anything. I mean, he, like, mostly seems to exist to provide comic relief to leftist YouTube creators who want low-effort content.
Clean teeth, like, I don't know, and that there's an element of classism there. See, New York City, there's an element of classism. Like, for example, right? One thing that I encountered here in New York City, which I did not encounter as much, right? But when I first came to New York City, whenever I'd be protesting, if there was like a Republican or a conservative who would see you protesting for Occupy Wall Street or anti-war, they would walk by you and they would say, "Get a job."
Hi, Mark Barden at Sandy Hook Promise here.
God, how many fucking ads are we gonna get in
the
this
gunman
thing?
And I always wondered what that meant. Like, why would we not have jobs because we're unemployed?
Wait, what? Did he just say what?
Why would we not have jobs because we're unemployed?
Because that's what being unemployed means.
They would say, "Get a job." And I always wondered, and especially, like, I remember one time I was at a rally of transit workers. It was a labor union rally of transit workers. We're all protesting, and this, like, wealthy lady says, "Why don't you all get a job?" And it's like, they're transit workers. Their signs say Transit Workers Union. But that's part of the New York City culture.
That isn't a specifically New York City thing. I mean, I've protested in like Cincinnati, and people have said that. I mean, it's like there's this assumption that nobody who's protesting could possibly have anything else to be doing. That, if somebody's protesting, that means that they must just be able to, just have nothing else to do in their lives or something like that.
Right. Another time I remember I was at, I was someplace. I was at, I think it was, it used to be. I think they stopped doing it, but maybe around COVID. I remember they have like this Halloween parade where like all the high school kids come in their Halloween costumes or whatever. So I was there and I was trying to sell communist newspapers to like, families and high school kids that are there for the Halloween parade. And I'm standing.
That sounds like a brilliant idea. Selling your shitty World vs. World Party newspaper to a bunch of people who clearly are not have shown absolutely no reason to believe they'd be
in
interested.
There by the subway stop, and I've got my communist newspapers. I'm like, communist newspaper, get the latest issue. And this like teenage girl walks up to me, and she's like, "Are you volunteering your time to sell that, or is that your job?" And I remember hearing that and thinking like she was clearly, because of the tone of her voice, she was trying to insult me. But I didn't understand the insult. Like, what if that was my job? Right? Would that make me a bad person? Well, in her mind, yes, right? Because she's rich, right? And the fact that you would be the kind of person that would sell a newspaper.
No, it's okay. You can write it off to cons if you want. Yeah, I mean, it's not just a disdain, it is just a weird take. This fucking Snox. He's like, it's not just like, he manages to take the reality that people have an aversion of going to the dentist in a direction that I never would have dreamed it was possible to take it. Because I thought it was fairly obvious why people don't like going to the dentist, because they got all the power tools and they stick that shit in your mouth and it makes really scary fucking noises, and it often hurts rather a lot, and you have to sit deadly still so that they don't like fucking take out stuff that you need. I thought that was fairly obvious. I thought that was like the sort of social consensus on why people are not keen to go to the dentist if they don't have to. But apparently, some people think that dentists are tooth fetishists.
It means you're like a disgusting poor person. That's what she was saying. I didn't grow up with that. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, and this kind of classist insult where you say to a group of people protesting, get a job, what they're saying is you're all homeless. You're homeless bums. That's why you're protesting. See, I didn't get that, right? Because it's like, right? And then the girl's like, is that your job to sell these newspapers? And I was just like, why? How is that an insult? Like, what if it was? Right?
Well, this, of course, assumes that he's reading the situation correctly. Because it could very well be that she's curious whether, if he's like saying, get your communist newspapers here, knowing that the what most people in the U.S. hear when they hear communist, it seems to be softening. It seems to be softening significantly, but I mean, it still is very much a term that people are not really accustomed to. Accustomed to hearing in a positive sense. So it could be that this girl was wondering, is he selling communist newspapers on the streets because he has to get paid to do something and this is his job, or is he selling them because he has decided that this is a good thing for which to volunteer his time? She could have been just asking that. It would be a totally legit question, because, it could very well be that she wanted to go a little bit further in the conversation. Maybe. Who fucking knows? But it could be that it's the first person that she's ever heard, suggesting like using the term communist in a positive way, and she wanted to hear more about that. And maybe that would be a time to, continue the conversation if there was any room for it. Maybe not. But, I mean, it seems like that would be the sort of moment that could be quite teachable, for example. But not for this dude, because he thinks dentists are tooth fetishists.
Got paid
Odontophiles.
$15 an hour to walk around handing out the communist newspaper, right? Wouldn't that be a good thing to do? But, this is how, like, kind of very rich brats talk, right? There's this feeling that if you have a low-income job, you are a bad person, right? You're a gross person.
See,
you're inferior.
We have to take a whole bunch of things as read, since we were not there to witness this. But that totally is not what I would have taken from the way, if that was were the words that she used to ask the question, I would assume that she actually was hoping for an answer to that. And I would give the benefit of the doubt, at least initially.
Right, and that's very much part of, like, the Manhattan rich kid, lives by Central Park. That's the way they think, right? And that's new to me. I just didn't grow up around people who think that way. Vosh thinks that way. Right, and that's very clear. If you listen to anything Vosh says, that's how he sees me. He sees me as an inferior working class person.
You're not a working class person. Also, Vosh, no. I mean, Vosh sees you as a fascist, but not in a way where he knows how to do anything about it, because Vosh is actually not very good at the thing that he is, like, supposedly a specialist in, namely debating chuds. When Vosh debated fucking Caleb Muppet actually ended up coming off looking pretty good.
Right? He, and that's, BreadTube. Thought Slime, ContraPoints, that's how they all think. They're all like rich kids like that, right?
No, they're fucking not.
But
he's so fucking working class. He worked in a nameless sandwich shop for 6 months when he was at uni. Wow. Man, fucking salt of the earth. I bet, fucking, Bruce Springsteen wrote songs about that life.
It's a weird thing, but it's interesting. Like, I wasn't used to that level of classism. I did have a high school teacher. I'll never forget this.
I'm skeptical of his interpretations of these things. Nothing about them seems actually, like, facially implausible to me. Like, especially if he was actually if he made that up in order to make this point, that was not the way you would have her ask the question. Like, the way you would have her ask the question is just, whoa, why are you doing that? Or something like that. That's how you would have her ask the question if you were making this up in order to make the point that he's trying to make. So, I mean, his stories so rarely fit well with the point he's trying to make, and he is not very good at lying. So, my inclination is to think that there is probably some truth to the facts, but not necessarily his interpretation of what's going on in anyone else's head.
I grew up in a small town. I had a high school teacher, and he...
God, I mean, next he's going to start talking about how he grew up in a place called Hope.
No, he lived in my little town, and, he had...
Fucking Bill Clinton.
He had a nice-sized house, and he had his own swimming pool in the backyard. So one time, one of the kids got wise with him and smarted off to him and said, well, you're rich, Mr. Hostetler.
You might not know it, but wiping your bum after you poop.
What the fuck? Like, I was gonna cut out the ads, but somehow having him laughing at his own not particularly funny story after an advertisement for, like, an ass sprayer. That's I kind of like that juxtaposition, actually.
And he replied to them, and he said, hey, kid. He's like, I'm rich for Orville, Ohio, okay? But you ain't seen rich, okay? I'm rich for this little town, but I am not rich. And I look back on that and I smile to myself because I'm like, he doesn't know how right he was. Like,
I think he probably did know how right he was. What makes you think he didn't know how right he was? Like, I mean, he's a fucking grown-ass person. He certainly knew, like, that there were fucking billionaires around, and, you know, like, what makes you think, like, what is Orville, Ohio, the Truman Show? Do people not get news of the outside world?
Yes, he was rich for my little town, my little tiny working class town in Ohio. Yes, he was rich enough that he owned his house, and then he had another lot with a nice swimming pool next to it. He was rich for Orville. But compared to New York City, he was not rich, right? He was not living by Central Park. He was not living in Long Island. You know, it's weird how these things work. But and then that kind of gets back to the whole thing that people say about anti-Semitism, about how anti-Semitism.
Oh, God. Oh, fucking hell. See, this is where he's taking this now. He's going to talk about anti-Semitism after that. After, yeah, you're rich, but you're not New York rich, and then he immediately takes it to anti-Semitism. Yeah, I mean, there's a good take incoming right now. There is a good take incoming when fucking Caleb Maupin starts bringing up anti-Semitism, something that he very frequently engages in. Yeah, you know, there can only be good takes.
Burger King. Is kind of weaponization of resentment against the middle class, right? It's the stereotype of a Jew is that a Jew is a shopkeeper or a doctor or a lawyer. He's a middle class, and that's someone who has more money that you can see. And that anti-Semitism was kind of a method of weaponizing the resentment of the working class against the middle class because
except you know, that is like a more recent Jewish stereotype, not really the one like when anti-Semitism really became a thing. I mean, first of all, we have to distinguish because there's the term is fairly recent. The term comes from the late 19th century. An asshole by the name of Wilhelm Ma, German shithead, who wanted to distinguish his anti-Jewish racism from primitive Christian anti-Judaism. But the thing is, that was already this idea of taking the bullshit race science that was used to justify all sorts of fucked up shit in the colonies and using it to justify, you know, oppressing Jews back home. That already was going on like 150 years before that. But, I mean, at the time, the stereotype actually was a little bit different. You had a handful of Jews who actually had some decent money. And then you had a huge number of Jews who were the brokest motherfuckers in the place. And so anti-Semitism, traditionally, this is why anti-Semitism manages to combine this idea that Jews are behind capitalism and communism. Because the idea is, you know, you've got... Yeah, exactly. You've got, because you've got this handful of Jews who have money. Well, they're obviously... You can't accuse them of being, you know, necessarily behind communism alone. That doesn't really work, because they've got money. But then you combine that with the working class Jews, the broke ones who were getting kicked from one country to another for centuries in Europe. And then you say, oh, see, they're behind communism. And you sort of manage to square that circle in this wonderful bullshit that has been, you know, getting Jewish people killed for a very long time. So, I mean, the shopkeeper stereotype is considerably more recent. That actually is like sort of the stereotype that pops up around Jewish refugees from Eastern and Central Europe who show up in like Britain and the US and manage to scrape together a little something, and then they open up like a tailor shop or a deli or some shit. But that is not the like traditional stereotype by any means.
Because they can see them. But if you're in a little town like I grew up in, you're not going to see super rich people. You're just not going to see them. So if you're going to resent somebody for being rich, you're going to resent the guy who lives, a few streets over, who has a big house and a nice swimming pool next to it. You're going to think, well, he's rich, and compared to you, he might be, right? But he doesn't run the government, right?
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, and of course, this is not something that fucking Caleb's going to get into because his definition of the working class is just non-existent. I mean, he has absolutely no concept of that. It's because he's a fucking assball. But I mean, the question isn't how much money, but how they get the money. Because you've got people who have to work for it, and then you've got people who get it just because they own shit. And that is the distinction. It's not so much a matter of how much. How much kind of, that can have an effect in some respects, but where the money comes from in the first place is kind of the really central thing.
And that's anti-Semitism historically. It is, stereotypes about Jewish people.
Like the ones that he flogs in Satan at the Fountainhead, for example, which is full of anti-Semitic stereotypes.
Stereotypes about the middle class. And it is kind of weaponizing the resentment of wage workers against store owners, lawyers, doctors, dentists. That's what anti-Semitism historically has been. Because
and also historically, that is exactly not what it has been. Because, I mean, historically, that was precisely not where you found a lot of Jews traditionally. Because for a very long time, we were banned from a lot of those, sort of more, I guess, middle class occupations. So which is why you actually had this very stark sort of distribution of, like, a large number of really just absolutely dirt poor Jewish people in Europe, and then a handful who had serious money, and very little in between. What he's talking about here is much, much more recent.
Stereotype of Jews is they're middle class. There were many Jewish factory workers, right?
Many. Fuck you, man. The fact is that for people get this idea in part. Yeah, exactly. Jews were also banned from owning land, pretty much completely banned from, like, agriculture and stuff like that. Pretty much any of the normal occupations. They were very much stuck on the margins of the economy in most of Europe for most of the 2,000 years that Jews lived in Europe. So what he's saying is just nonsense. And saying, oh, well, there were some Jewish factory workers. Actually, the majority of Jews, again, were working class. Were actually on the ass end of the working class a lot of the time. And, I mean, people get this really skewed impression of that a lot of the time, because so much focus when they talk about, like, individuals and individual families in, say, like, movies about the Holocaust or books about it or something like that, it's usually from sort of the Jewish bourgeoisie. The Tietzes, the Schragenheims, the, Wertheims, and them. People whose names were well known because they had money. And people get this idea, especially, you had this whole thing where there was a sort of shakedown class action suit against Swiss banks, and it creates the impression that, like, all Jews in Europe just had money squirreled away in Swiss banks before the Nazis showed up and murdered them. And the reality is, most Jews did not actually recover from the fucking Great Depression. And they couldn't even afford just a local regular bank account, let alone some sort of Swiss bank account. Yeah, I mean, fucking hell. This guy.
And, that every anti-Semitic trope that you've ever heard tends to be a kind of working class resentment against the middle class. I find that
It's funny because actually it tends to be very much petty bourgeois resentment against both the working class and, large capital. It tends to be like, which is exactly, he's occasionally talked about like the sort of allies he sees in his struggle for Nazbolism. And he considers the petty bourgeoisie, naturally, since he's fash, he considers the petty bourgeoisie totally to be an ally. And what he's talking about are actually very much petty bourgeois resentments.
to be fascinating, right? If you talk about the roots of anti-Semitism, and that's why I would argue that.
Oh God, yeah, I please don't talk about the roots of anti-Semitism, Caleb. Yeah, this is not a good place for you to go.
Wokeism is a lot like anti-Semitism.
Oh fuck you! Okay, this is fascinating. We've gone from people don't want to go to the dentist because they think dentists want to fuck teeth, to wokeism is a lot like anti-Semitism. Except in the sense that he likes anti-Semitism. He's pretty fucking anti-Semitic. And he does not like whatever he defines as wokeism.
Right? Because, you can't see Rockefeller. You can't see Bill Gates. But you can see the white person who's got it slightly better than you. You can see the man who's got slightly better than you. You can see the non-LGBT person.
Yeah, except it's not resentment. It's simply pointing out that there are axes of oppression. What? Why am I... Yeah, explaining this shit when he's so just very clearly... He just doesn't give a fuck. It's like... Wokeism is like, that's the sort of take that the ADL would probably totally be on board with, because the ADL also really likes anti-Semitism. They are big supporters of all the main anti-Semites. They're absolute pieces of shit, and that is why nobody who should ever use them as a source for anti-racist work.
And that wokeism is about weaponizing people's resentment, not against the system, but against people who have
against
privilege.
Fucking aspects of Jesus. Well, of course, he's making up. Everybody who uses terms like wokeism is just making up what that is. So this is him making it up. This is actually him doing a better job of defining what he means when he uses this fucking bullshit term than when he did a whole video where he was walking through Manhattan, talking into his phone about it.
People who got it slightly better than them, and that is what anti-Semitism kind of is in its essence. Look at the essence of anti-Semitism.
So the essence of anti-Semitism somehow manages not to involve Jews at all. That's very, very convenient for him.
Weaponizing resentment, not against the system, but against other people in your life. Get you mad at people you can see, right? So there you go. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, that's just fascinating. We've gone on such a weird fucking magical mystery tour here. Hello, Riveroon. So we've gone from dentists have a tooth fetish, and that's why people don't want to sit in their chair, to wokeism is the same thing as anti-Semitism. This is fucking wild. And we still haven't actually talked about mass line and communist outreach.
Very fascinating. But yes, Killian, now I get the reference. It was Irving Howe. And I still don't understand what he was saying. I still do.
It's so fucking obvious. He's saying the guy who is some sort of radical Maoist, student dude is going to cool down, and he's going to be just a fucking neat little bourgeois dentist, and he has no real commitment to any of it.
Do not understand what he was saying. Why is, hey kid, you're going to be a dentist? Why is that a way to insult a young Maoist? Some young kid, with his little red book, ran up to Irving Howe, right? And he waved, you're a sellout pro-imperialist. And Irving,
he has a fucking red book prop for this.
I'd say, hey kid, you know what you're gonna be? You're gonna be a dentist. How's that an insult? I don't get it.
Yeah, I believe that he doesn't get it because he doesn't get a lot of the things.
How is that an insult? How is that an insult? What if that kid had played with doll's teeth his whole life? What if he was the elf in the Santa?
Oh God, you gotta call back the A material. Oh, well, see, that would be better, Adria, than what he came up with. Because he somehow thinks that people relate to communism, whatever, including, like, the fake, actually fascist, fake communism that he's into, where he just sort of puts a red flag on fast shit. But that they think it is like something that they don't want, that they know deep down is a good and necessary thing that they will eventually have to do, but they really want to just put it off. And it's like, no, I don't think that's what people, I don't think that is most people's attitude towards communism. It would actually be so much easier on a certain level if that were their attitude. If if people deep down were like, yeah, I mean, obviously you gotta do communism, but it's gotta be such a hassle. And then, I mean, that would be so much easier to approach people if that were the thinking. If we managed to, like, shift the Overton window to the point where people groan at communism because obviously you need to do it, but it's a hassle, we would be so much better. We would be in so much better position. Because then it's just like, oh, well, it doesn't have to be so much of one if you do it right.
Claus piece, right? And he was like, I want to be a dentist. And then Irving Howe said to him, you're going to be a dentist. And he's like, yes, I am going to be a dentist. All right, I'm being silly now.
You kind of always are. The difference is that now he actually realizes it. Usually he's being silly and he thinks he's being deadly serious.
Probably good I'm in a lighthearted mood. There's so many nights I get on here and I scream and yell and cry and stuff like that. And here I am telling jokes about dentists and stuff.
Like, I don't know that I would call them jokes. It's just really, really weird insights into this man's mind.
So there we go. Good times. Alrighty. I think Hal was trying to say the Maoist kid was going through.
Yeah, obviously, yes. Obviously, that's what he said.
That's probably right, John. You're probably right. You're probably right about that. But there you go. Kudos to Killian for remembering that obscure anecdote, even if you got the name wrong. That's fine. Yeah. There you go. See, I didn't get it, but
yeah, we got that you didn't get it. We got that like 5 or 6 times.
Going through a phase, and he would become a normie. It's weird. I've met people that were in.
Maybe he's a Maoist dentist. Like, maybe he is a dentist, and you go in there and you've got like fucking a portrait of Mao and Light, and
have been a lot of people that were in the 1970s New Communist movement who did just kind of become normal. And that's interesting to me.
Hey folks, our fundraising deadline is coming up, and I need your support to reach our goal.
You got plenty of money to do genocide. You don't. Yeah, if you got money for genocide, Joe, you don't need our money. If you were really hard up for fundraising, you'd take some of that genocide money. You'd put the genocide on the back burner, and you'd spend the fucking money on something, on whatever you're fucking begging from us for.
I have met people that were in the RCP, people that were in the October League, people that were in the Communist Workers' Party.
And
who
none
just
of
are
them, all of them avoid him.
Normal people now.
I mean, one thing you can say for fucking Caleb Maupin, he is not normal people.
And I find it kind of odd. I don't know. I don't, I don't quite know what to make of it.
Yeah, because you have no class analysis because you're a Nazbol.
I also get the idea that a lot of those groups were very controlling and authoritarian.
Yeah, unlike the CPI where they tell you when you're supposed to applaud and rehearse it with you.
And that a lot of times the people in some of the NCM groups, they didn't really have a full understanding of what they were doing.
Yeah, unlike Caleb here, who doesn't understand what anti-imperialism is.
So maybe that's why they were able to just kind of turn it off and go back to being normal. Because they didn't really understand it.
Well, I mean, this is just such a fucking moralist, individualist way of looking at that. I mean, it seems like probably what happens with a lot of people who are involved in, like, radicalism and student groups, a lot of them come from a class background that is at odds with. And so they leave, they leave university, they get, like, cushy fucking jobs. And, of course, hij weet ook niet waarover hij praat niet. And so, they end up as fucking stockbrokers and, patent lawyers and judges and senior bureaucrats and shit like that. And at that point, they're surrounded in a milieu like the one they grew up in, where obviously they will be fucking pariahs if they, were to continue in that vein. Like, I mean, it's class interest. It has a lot to do with social pressures, I would say. And some people are just trying it on. I mean, some people are just trying it on, and they and I think there's also, I mean, I really hate to say that he had a point. And it is such a ridiculous point for him to have to talk about groups being controlling and authoritarian when he's just got a fucking cult that declares him the infallible ideological leader. Like, that's not controlling and authoritarian. But yeah, a lot of these groups chew people up and spit them out. They do not give people meaningful, ways of building, working class power or anything like that. It's like, here's some fucking newspapers, go and sell them. And they just expect that a bunch of people are going to leave. Like, the SWP is famously, one of the things that came out of the Pitchford inquiry, which was looking at spy cops, at political spying by police in Britain in, like, the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And the early 2000s. They had this manual. The Special Patrol Group had a manual, and they went through all the different political groups at the time that it was written. And they said about the SWP that it was a piece of piss to get in there and to bug out, because they don't give a shit about their members, and they expect that people are going to get turned off by it eventually, and they're just going to fall away and leave, and so nobody asks any questions. If that is your experience with revolutionary politics, is organizations that don't show any appreciation for their members and just give, like, the rank and file membership grunt work that does not actually involve them in any meaningful way, does not actually, require any creativity, require them to learn anything or organize or anything like that, where all they're doing is just selling papers and shit. Yeah, people are going to just leave. It's going to turn people off. So that comes into it as well.
There was a lot of those Maoist groups in the 70s were very secretive. And there was a lot of, obey the leader, follow the leader kind of thing going on.
Again, not that the CPI would ever do anything like that.
One thing I will say that, when I was in Cleveland, I was in a certain communist group, and then I switched.
Yeah, he was in Fist.
And I joined the Workers' World Party. And that certain communist group I had been in, there were a lot of people that were either kicked out or expelled that were my age or just slightly older.
What's the difference between being kicked out or expelled? I thought being expelled was another way of saying that you were kicked out. Like, does he mean physically kicked out?
And so I would go to restaurants in Cleveland. Cleveland's a much smaller place than New York City. And I would see people that had been Maoist communists with me that were now just living normal lives. They were living biologically.
Oh, yeah. That is a term that if you read the things that former members of CPI Mark I said about him, one of the things was this woman whose life he fucked up. Like, he deliberately got her fired from her job, and then she was trying to find another job so that she wouldn't just be subsisting by doing survival sex work specifically for him. And he told her that she can either live biologically or be in the movement. And of course, like...
Right? That's I don't know. Maybe that's cult language or whatever, but that's...
Yeah, wow. Wow, okay. That is is that insight? I do not dare to believe it is. But yeah, it is fucking cult language. Very, very correct.
The way that you talk about it, right? When people stop living a communist life, when they just, start just kind of living a normal, average life, they're living...
Like, I mean, what the... Okay, but a communist life that does... You're a member of the, fucking working class. You are obviously going to be working for a living, and you're organizing, one assumes, or trying to, in your workplace. That's not living biologically. That's the fucking job. That's like, if you're trying to do revolution, you're trying to do a working class revolution, that's what you do to the extent that you can. That's kind of the thing that we try to do and encourage others to do and everything. Like, I mean, and he's talking about it like, being a worker is somehow completely unrelated to communism. And this, yeah, I mean, he is an asshole. This is one of those moments where you realize that he really is just so completely divorced from... He can quote, the same 2 paragraphs of Marx as many times as he likes, but his understanding of any of this is just fucking non-existent.
Living biologically. They're biologically alive. They're not really alive because they're not involved in the revolution. And I would meet people that were slightly older than me that I had known as Maoist communists who were living biologically. And one thing I would notice about them was that they, as soon as I started talking to them about communism, something snapped in their head, and suddenly they would just start...
Well, maybe it's you, though. Maybe that's what they wanted to be talking about. Maybe that was all they talk about. But then that fucking Caleb Maupin guy showed up, and everyone's like, yeah, okay, we gotta freeze him out, or he's never gonna leave us alone.
And I couldn't convince them to not think like the communist group they would have been in. And I just thought it was so odd, right? I would just be like, okay, you're no longer in this communist group. You're just living a normal life. So I'm trying to tell you about this other communist group. And then immediately, something clicks in their mind. And they're all like, well, that communist group is bad because of...
Well, because, I mean, if Caleb Maupin likes it, you can be fairly certain that it's not good. I mean, that is about the best endorsement I can get, the best negative endorsement I can imagine. Like, if Caleb Maupin's like, you gotta join this fucking group, it's great. Yeah, I think I'm gonna give it a miss, actually.
Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, you're not in the other communist group. Why can't you just listen to me now? I always thought that was odd, right? And it's just
He's
you're
so
not
insightful.
even in this other communist group, so why do you still believe everything they told you? The other thing that I thought...
Well, because it's possible to share, still believe in things despite not being in a particular group that also believes in those things.
Was sad, and this one really kind of broke my heart, is that I would meet ex-communists, right?
God, this game.
Oh.
Yeah! The gameplay on this sucks.
And their reason for being ex-communist was, I'm not good enough.
What? The reason for being ex-communist is Caleb Maupin isn't good enough? I mean, not wrong. He is not good enough. He absolutely is not good enough, but I mean, I don't know why that should turn anyone off communism. It's not like he's part of communism. He probably does. I mean, he thinks communism is fascism, and he thinks fascism is communism. And when you understand that, you're sorted.
That one broke my heart, and I never want that to be the case, because that is a failure. I would meet these people, I'd be in a restaurant.
But you literally aren't good enough. I mean, the minute you actually realize that would be a success.
Or I'd be walking down the street in Cleveland, and I'd see somebody that I'd been in the communist group with. And so I would chat them up.
That's not what that means. That is not what chat them up means.
I'd say, why aren't you doing communist stuff anymore? And they'd say, well, I'm not good enough. You know, I just don't have the strength to do it anymore. I'm not.
Like, what? Yeah, but what stuff are you even talking about? Like, what stuff was this group even doing? I mean, the only things I know about Fist, the only reason I know about it is he will occasionally show pictures of himself from when he was in it, and I know they did some, like, fucking, like, just protest stuff and, you know, fairly standard things.
You know, I couldn't sell newspapers well enough. I wasn't smart enough. I didn't understand the theory.
Well, which I have to say, I mean, that already sounds like lots of failures on the part of the group. First of all, like, this obsession with making people sell newspapers, it doesn't fucking work. Nobody reads the newspapers. Nobody reads the newspapers. And I doubt that they managed to recruit a whole bunch of people at all by selling them. And it's just a useless task. Like, I mean, out of all the things that you could, like, encourage people to do as, like, revolutionary work for a communist or a socialist group or whatever, like, just getting people to try to sell newspapers, that is a great way to turn them off.
I wasn't good enough to do it.
Hello, Super Luigi and Daisy. Yeah, I mean, he is such a... Yeah, I mean, what gets me about all of this is he's still, like... Yeah, he's using the terms that people actually pointed out he was using to manipulate them. Also, Super Luigi and Daisy, welcome. I don't think I've seen you here before, and it's always cool when I see new people here. I love that. How'd you find us? I always like to know, because it amazes me when people I did not specifically email to let them know the stream exists show up and find out the stream exists. Welcome.
That breaks my heart. What kind of organization is that? Right?
Well, I mean, it sounds like the kind of organization you're running, Caleb, where you, like, make people pay rent to stay in a shitty hotel in Jersey City and then sell even shittier merch and then tell them that's the revolution?
Right? Nope.
And then they have to, like, salute the 3 different flags and they have to applaud at the right time for you? Yeah, I mean, yeah, what they're describing is a shitty organization, but yeah, like, I mean, you do not compare favorably.
No one, and that was a really common reason I would meet for people quitting being communists, is they just they didn't feel up to it. And if you create an atmosphere, everyone should be able to make a contribution, right? And if
what's fucked up here, to me, is what he's saying here. Like, if you did not know the backstory, if you did not know that this guy is, like, the leader of an extremely exploitative, fucked up, crypto-fascist cult, what he's saying is actually quite valid. I mean, He's, of course, using this as a sales pitch to get people into a highly exploitative authoritarian crypto-fascist cult. But it's true, lots of these organizations have shitty practice. They treat people badly. They, make people think they're not good enough rather than, like, encouraging them to grow and develop as people and as revolutionaries within, within the group, and giving them room for growth and, help to, like, learn new things and find useful ways that they can participate and, in what the group is trying to do and stuff like that. I mean, it's true. Lots of these groups are really shitty. And the thing is, in addition to just being shitty towards, like, people and just not a great way to really build a movement, it's also horrible security culture, because if you create that sort of environment, that is a perfect environment for cops to come in. That is a perfect environment for all kinds of malicious actors to come in, because nobody will notice, and nobody will notice when they disappear one day. Because everybody's used to people just coming and going, because they show up, they say, oh, okay, this is interesting, I'll try it out for a bit, oh wow, this sucks, I'm going. And nobody notices, because everyone just figures that that is just the life cycle of a member of the group.
You're building an organization that's making people feel inferior, making people feel like they're not good enough. That's a failure on the part of the communists. That's not that person's fault,
Oh, well, that's great. Welcome. Where are you joining us from, if you don't mind my asking? I'm always curious. This is a multilingual stream. I mean, it's mostly in English because most of the people watching it are primarily English speakers. But if you look through my back catalog, you'll find a bunch of stuff that's in Spanish, a bunch of stuff that's in German, other languages as well. Yeah, except the CPI is so much worse than the groups he's talking about. I mean, they managed to take all the things he's talking about and make them fucking worse. I mean, that's what's wild. It's like he recognized, like, and the thing is, he does seem sincere when he's saying this stuff. This is what really gets me about him. Because occasionally, hello, Daisy, the foot dog. He will occasionally sound very, very sincere and, down to earth and everything like that, and say something like this that is actually quite valid. I mean, there are lots of groups that fit this description, and they do just chew people up and spit them out, and they turn people off of, revolutionary work. But, I mean, then at the same time, it's like, look at the fucking show he's running. It is by all measures worse than the places that he's talking about.
No, that person wasn't not good enough, right? We're trying to build a mass movement of millions of people, and people voluntarily in this society go and join a communist group, and then they do it for a year or 2 years, and they're like, I'm just not good enough for this, and they quit. That sucks. That's not a reason. No one should ever quit a communist group because they think they're not good enough. Right?
Well, maybe it isn't that they shouldn't quit. Maybe it's that they shouldn't be made to feel that way. Maybe there should be a culture of just recognizing that we all are fucking growing and developing constantly, and, that encourages that. And encourages people to find the best way that they can contribute and stuff like that. A completely different culture that is perhaps not just a top-down fucking authoritarian cult where a handful of dickheads who've been around forever control everything, and then there are a bunch of people whose entire role is to sell newspapers. Maybe you need a totally different organizational culture. Not one that has, like, somebody written into the organization's bylaws as the ideological leader, Caleb.
Any communist group that has people quitting for that reason has really failed. That is a really, really...
Yeah, I mean, and then you remember that his group has people quitting for the reason that he's exploiting them that he's manipulating them into doing fucking sex work for his benefit, that he's like exploiting them sexually and commercially and everything. And it's like, you know, between kicking people out and making them feel that they're not good enough and having people leave an organization because they're sick of being sexually and economically exploited by an unappealing asshole from a small town in Ohio, I still think that I'll take the former.
That is a sad organization because, you know, everyone has a contribution to make.
I would love... Amharic is a language, actually, I've tried to learn. I, like, know 2-3 words of it. Yucatec Mayan, I know... bueno, de esa wea no sé nada. Un poquitito de Mapuzungún, pero... pero bueno, de lo idioma y bueno, originario de Centroamérica no sé nada, po. Bueno, a lo sumo los nombres.
Everyone has a contribution to make. I believe we should view everybody as being capable of making a contribution. And there's
yeah, except the only contribution he wants anyone to make is applauding at the right times and selling shitty merch.
Shouldn't be anyone who's on the outside because they say, well, you know, I joined this communist group, but they were all, you know, they were all doing more activism. I just didn't have the energy to do the same amount of activism they did.
And I mean, it's, God, it's so, this is so wild. You have to peel layers. Because if this were coming from somebody that did not have his background, that did not, was not like fucking selling membership in the kind of organization he is promoting, what he's saying is totally valid. You know, it's true. I've said similar things, and I do not mind admitting it, even though, but I mean, coming from him, it is just buck wild. I thought that the wildest thing that we would see in this video was his fucking bizarre ideas about why people are hesitant to go to the dentist. But this is wilder than that. Because it's like, does he not see that literally every single thing he's saying applies tenfold to the groups that he's run?
So I quit. That come on. We can do better than that. We can do better than that.
Yeah, you could. I don't know if you could do better than that. Like, ideologically, I don't think you would actually be able to improve on that, because you're worse than that.
Right? Yes, not everyone can be as active. Some people are good at some things, and some people are good at other things, but nobody should be leaving a communist group because they just say, I'm not good enough. Any communist group that makes you feel like, oh, the people...
I don't know. I mean, there's some people who aren't, because they suck. You know, I mean, like, white supremacists are not good enough. Like, you know, fucking committed transphobes are not good enough. Those are suck people. They can either work on that, or they have absolutely no business in any kind of communist group. Caleb. Yeah. I mean, this is just wild, because if you just saw this, and this is all you saw of him, it is so reasonable and so, like, I mean, it is so totally too much like right. But then you know the background of his organization and the shit that they get up to, and it's like, how the hell does he hold these ideas in his head? Because he seems terribly sincere when he's saying this. He seems more sincere when he's saying this than, like, most of the things he ever says. And then he has a group that he runs and manages to make all these other groups that suck, that have really shitty organizational culture, look better by comparison.
Well, you know, the people, you know, in the group make me feel I'm inferior. That's not a good group. I'll just tell you that much.
Well, what if, like, for example, the group had, like, a special inner circle clique where they had Iranian power rings to demonstrate that they were actually the elite members of the group and not, like, the rabble, and they say, had drills on when to applaud in order to make the great leader look as exalted as possible. That would seem like maybe not a great organizational praxis. Yeah, I mean, my headcanon of these interactions is that everybody was coming up with the answer that would minimize the necessary interaction with Caleb Maupin. I think a lot of people have actually, I mean, probably decide how to respond to Caleb Maupin based on the criterion of how to minimize interactions with Caleb Maupin. And I have to say, Vosh is really, I mean, you really see just how little he knows about anything when he debates fucking Caleb Muppet. Because he manages, like, Vosh actually is one of the few people that has, like, debated Caleb Muppet, and Caleb Muppet comes away looking better by comparison. Because Vosh's whole thing is that he doesn't know anything and he's proud, and he thinks he can just sort of talk in a monotone like this, like the most annoying guy at the student pub, and you just do this for a really long time, and you occasionally say something that's pretty low-key fucked up, and then you just sort of keep on going like this, and like just forever, and you talk really fast, and eventually people just kind of give up on you because it's really annoying. But a certain group of people think that makes you clever. But it does not work when you have to peel all of the layers that a grifter like fucking Muppet has to peel.
But
like fucking Vosh would have absolutely no way of dealing with this, for example. He simply would not, because it requires a level of analysis that he's just not capable of, because he's a very superficial person.
Other thing I would notice, I've noticed that with older people too, right? I remember at Occupy Wall Street, there was this guy who used to come around, and he had a sign about like white privilege or something. And I would try to sell him Workers' World newspaper, and he would say, "Aren't you a Trotskyite?"
Neben ausgezeichneten Großformaten bietet Whitewall auch großartige Geschenkideen an. Zum einen diesen...
It's interesting. You can tell that I watch videos in a lot of different languages because I get ads in like Russian, I get ads in Arabic, I get ads in German, Spanish, you name it. And they're always in the most annoying possible places.
I'd be like, wait, what? Because Workers' World historically has been a Trotskyite group, right? And I'd be like, what? This guy was like in his 70s, but when he was like in his 20s, he'd been in the Progressive Labor Party. And you talk to this guy, he was anti-communist, he was just some kind of weird hippie now. But when I tried to sell him Workers' World, he's like, "You're a Trotskyite. Workers' World is a Trotskyite organization that is aligned with the revisionist Soviet Union." And it was weird because it's like he doesn't support Progressive Labor Party anymore. But it's like...
Progressive Labor Party, was that LaRouche? No, Milt Rosen. No, okay. No, not, I mean, it was something Labor Party. See, all of these interactions make perfect sense if you assume that that people are trying to minimize their interaction with him.
Something clicks in his brain the second he sees me trying to sell him the other communist newspaper.
The second he sees you, more like.
And suddenly it's like he's in the Progressive Labor Party 50 years ago. And I mean, that is weird. I do not understand that one. That one perplexes me. I've seen that a lot of people that were once in a communist group, and then they're living a normal life.
Well, maybe, yeah, Jesus. Like, does he not understand that people join groups often because they have beliefs. They don't have the beliefs before they, because they're in the group, and then leave them at the door when they go. Like, somebody can be totally, ideologically aligned with the Progressive Labor Party, which I don't think even exists anymore. Founded. No, they still exist. I mean, they have a fucking website. Though the Wikipedia article doesn't seem to offer. Let me see. Okay, I'm gonna check out. Okay. No, I mean, like, the Progressive Labor Party it has an actively updated website. I literally never heard any of these people. But okay. So somebody can be totally ideologically aligned with a group and not be in the group any longer because they had other things to do or they didn't like the internal culture of the group or something like that. People do that all the time. I mean, I'm ideologically aligned with a lot of groups that I'm not in because there's only so much time in the day.
And then you see them and then you remind them of the communist group, and then all of a sudden something snaps in their brain and they're talking at you like they're still in this other communist group.
Yeah, or maybe they just still believe the things that they believe.
That weirds me out.
Unlike, say, his whole shtick about how dentists are teeth fetishists.
Perplexes me. I do not. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's like if you were a dentist and then you became a bricklayer and then you met another dentist and all of a sudden I don't know that one.
Yeah. Why is that? Why would that be? Leaving aside that, I don't think that's a very common CV sequence to have, dentist, bricklayer. But I mean, let's say, you decide you're gonna lay brick for some reason. You decide you're sick of dentistry. I mean, apparently it has an appallingly high rate of depression in the field. So, I mean, it wouldn't be surprising if some people decided to make a move like that, I guess. Just for a change. But, I mean, if they do that, that doesn't mean they don't have, like, their fucking dental knowledge and experience. It doesn't mean they have turned their back on the concept of dentistry. So if they run into a dentist, obviously they're going to talk about dentist shit.
That one perplexes me, right? That one perplexes me.
He is perplexed by the most fucking bog standard normal things in the world.
But yeah, John had another super chat here. I think the term living biologically sounds like a criticism and idea.
Oh, he's getting called the fuck out. Yes, it does. It is a very ideal. It is. There's nothing because Caleb Maupin is not a materialist. He's an asshole.
Idealist would make not a materialist. You might be right, John. You might be right. To each their own. We don't want to be judgmental. You can't hate the masses of people, right? And that's what some of that stuff.
But it's not hating the masses of people. It's just pointing out that for all your talk of like scientific socialism and stuff, you don't seem to understand any of it.
Potentially leads to. If you start thinking that way, we're the good ones. We're the ones that are really alive. The mass.
You're the one who used the fucking term. Like, you're the one who brought the term in there.
Are just a bunch of sheep. That leads to dangerous anti-populist thinking.
You're the one who was using the term in the first place. He's criticizing the term.
The masses are the real heroes. That's what I always tell people to quote from the Little Red Book. And the masses are the ones that'll do the real heroism in the revolution.
Like, okay, this is so weird. So somebody points out, makes an obvious criticism, and actually, I mean, a very mild, I would say, criticism, considering how, like, just fucked up the concept is. But, and all he does is pivot away from that and quote Mao? I notice it is basically time to wrap up, so I'm going to do that.
We're just the people that have, the science and would offer the leadership to point them in the right direction. We have to view the masses as the real heroes. We have to be in awe of the masses. We have to love the masses.
He just totally changes the subject.
That's what you read. if you have a copy of the Little Red Book, I encourage everybody.
This is like the first time I have ever seen this motherfucker take any interest in anything Mao said.
To go and read.
Now all of a sudden he's a Maoist.
Read the chapter on the mass line. Right, that is a very good chapter of the Little Red Book. Let me point you toward it. Chapter 11. Chapter 11 of the Little Red Book. He talks about, the masses are the real heroes, right? And you have to love the masses of people. And
as opposed to the masses of what? Okay, it's time for me to get going, unfortunately. Though we did make it through this amazing fucking magical mystery tour through the mind of Caleb Muppet. Let me just say, I just dropped the link in chat for the Discord. If you want to join there, we can keep in touch in between streams. You can make suggestions, ideas. Love to hear from you there. And if you enjoy the stream, please consider supporting the stream with a tip. The link just got dropped in there by Nightbot. That helps me continue to do all these projects by just helping me cover my expenses and stuff. So I always appreciate that. I know that, these are really just remarkably shitty economic times, and nobody should feel bad if they can't. But if they can and they want to, it is very much appreciated. Have a very good night, and I will see you again Friday night, same time, 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time.